Accept me as your concubine. I will do anything you ask, pleaded the poor mother. The small village lay under the harsh sun, its dusty roads winding between cracked houses and fields that had long since lost their green color. In one of the smallest, most fragile homes at the edge of the village lived Amina, a mother whose life was full of struggle and worry. Her house was no more than a wooden shack with holes in the roof and walls that shook whenever the wind blew too hard. Inside, the floor was bare, and the few belongings she owned, an old cooking pot, a thin blanket, and a few worn-out clothes, were all she had to call her own. The house did not have much, but it held the heartbeat of her life, her children. Amina had 3 children. There was Sarah, the eldest at 10, who already helped her mother with small chores and carried a seriousness in her eyes that belonged more to adults than to children. Then came Omar, a lively boy of 8, whose laughter sometimes filled the house with light even when the cupboards were empty. And finally little Noor, barely 5, who clung to her mother's side constantly, too young to understand the world but too aware of hunger to sleep peacefully. Every day for Amina was a battle. She woke up before sunrise, not out of habit but necessity. She would step outside, her worn sandals crunching against the dry earth, and survey the fields around the village. The soil had turned brown and hard. Nothing grew as it should. Sometimes she went to the nearby market to see if there were any odd jobs she could do. Amina could sew a little, wash clothes for others, or run errands, but opportunities were rare, and the pay was barely enough to buy a few pieces of bread. Her mornings were often filled with walking from one house to another asking politely if anyone needed help. Some people were kind enough to offer small tasks. Mrs. Khalid, an elderly woman, occasionally paid Amina to mend her old clothes. Sometimes the grocer let her take leftover vegetables for her children without asking for money, knowing her plight. But these moments of kindness were rare, and the hunger in her children's stomachs did not wait. When she returned home, Amina faced another challenge, making what little she had stretch enough to feed her children. Most days there was barely enough food for one simple meal. Sometimes it was just a thin porridge made from whatever grains she could find or scavenge, flavored with scraps of vegetables. She ate the smallest portions herself, always giving the best to her children, even if it left her stomach aching with emptiness. She never wanted her children to feel the desperation she carried. The evenings were the hardest. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, Amina would gather her children and sit by the single lantern in their home. She would try to make stories of hope and adventure, to distract them from the pangs of hunger that gnawed at their tiny bodies. Sarah would listen quietly, her small hands clasped together, imagining the worlds her mother described. Omar would occasionally laugh, and Noor would blink her big innocent eyes, too young to understand the reality of their lives. Amina had dreams too, though they were often tucked away behind walls of reality. She wished her children could go to school, learn to read and write, and one day escape the endless cycle of poverty. She longed for them to have shoes that fit, clothes that were not patched together, and beds that were soft and warm. But for now, those dreams seemed like distant stars, shining far away in the night sky. All she could do was survive, one day at a time, and try to protect the fragile hope within her children's hearts. Despite the challenges, Amina carried a quiet strength. She had learned not to cry in front of her children, though sometimes the tears fell silently when she was alone, hidden behind the thin walls of her home. She worried constantly. What if she fell sick and could not work? What if the children became too hungry to focus at school, even if they managed to attend? What if the rain destroyed the little house she had built with her own hands? Each worry felt like a stone pressing down on her chest. Yet she bore it silently, because crying would not fill empty stomachs. One morning, as Amina walked to the market, she noticed the other villagers carrying baskets of fresh vegetables, meat, and bread. She smiled faintly at the sight, but her heart ached. She longed to provide the same for her children. She thought about how little it took to feel secure. Just enough food, clean water, and a safe place to sleep. But it was so far beyond her reach. Each step she took felt heavy, yet she pressed on, reminding herself that she must keep moving, for herself and for her children. Amina's days were often interrupted by small crises. Sometimes a child would fall sick with a fever, and she had no money to pay for medicine. Other times, a sudden storm would ruin the small amount of food she had stored. Each challenge brought a wave of panic, but she learned to adapt. She scavenged for herbs, asked neighbors for advice, and worked twice as hard to make up for what the world had taken from her. Her life was harsh, but it had taught her resilience. At night, when the village fell silent and only the wind whispered through the trees, Amina would sit outside her home and stare at the stars. She whispered promises to her children, promises she hoped one day she could keep. She promised them safety, comfort, and happiness. Even though the days were filled with struggle, she held on to hope as tightly as she held her children's hands. That hope became a quiet light inside her, one that refused to go out, no matter how heavy the darkness around her became. Sometimes villagers would see Amina working tirelessly and comment on her perseverance. "She never gives up," they would say quietly, shaking their heads in admiration. But Amina never sought praise. Her strength was not for others to see. It was for her children, for the small, fragile lives depending on her. She often reminded herself that survival was not about dignity. It was about love, sacrifice, and the courage to continue when the world seemed determined to pull you down. As the days passed, Amina's determination grew. She began planning small ways to improve their life. Maybe she could plant vegetables in a small corner of land near the house. Perhaps she could sew clothes for other villagers and earn a little extra. Even small changes were victories. Every evening she shared these ideas with her children, encouraging them to dream alongside her, even if it was just a flicker of imagination in their tired hearts. Through it all, Amina's love never wavered. Hunger, exhaustion, and hardship could not weaken her. She held her children close at night, whispering words of comfort, and in those moments, they forgot the hunger, the cold, and the fear. In her arms, they were safe. And for Amina, that was everything. No matter what the world demanded of her, no matter how heavy the days became, she would continue to fight, continue to endure, and continue to love, because her children's lives depended on it, and her love was stronger than any challenge the world could throw at her. Days turned into weeks, and Amina's struggle to provide for her children became even more urgent. The food in the small house grew scarcer, and the little money she earned from sewing and small errands barely lasted a day. Each morning she would wake before sunrise, carry her children's hopes in her heart, and step into the dusty roads once again. Every step felt heavier than the last, but Amina could not stop. She had no choice. Her children depended entirely on her. One afternoon, as she wandered near the village market, she overheard whispers about a wealthy family who lived on the other side of town. They were known to help people in desperate need, but their generosity came with conditions. Some villagers spoke cautiously of them, warning that the family had high expectations and that those seeking help must offer labor in return. Others, however, hinted that the family had helped change lives and that those who endured their rules were rewarded in the end. Amina's heart pounded as she listened. The thought of approaching them filled her with fear. The stories she had heard made her anxious, but the desperation in her heart for her children overpowered her hesitation. She thought of Sarah and Omar and little Noor, and how thin their clothes had become, how tired their small bodies were from hunger. The image of her children crying softly at night haunted her. Amina realized that if she did not try, they might face an even harsher future. That night, Amina sat by the flickering lantern with her children sleeping beside her. She did not cry, though the weight of the decision she was contemplating pressed heavily on her chest. She thought about approaching the wealthy family asking for work, and possibly agreeing to whatever conditions they required. Her heart ached at the idea of submitting herself to hardship, of placing herself in a position where her dignity could be tested. But the thought of her children hungry and cold was far worse. The next morning she gathered what little courage she had and set out for the family's estate. The house was massive compared to her tiny shack, with walls painted in white and windows that sparkled in the sun. Flowers lined the front yard, and the air smelled faintly of fresh bread and sweet fruits. Amina felt small and out of place as she approached the gate, but she steadied herself. She reminded herself that she was not there for comfort or recognition. She was there for survival, and for her children. When she knocked, a servant answered. Amina's voice shook slightly as she explained her situation. "Please, sir," she said, bowing her head. "I have 3 children. I have no husband, no money, and no home that can feed them."
I will work for you. I will do anything you ask to survive.
"Please, help me." The servant studied her for a long moment. Finally, he nodded and led her to the lady of the house, a woman who looked kind but had a sharp, serious gaze. Amina repeated her plea, this time more carefully, explaining how she could sew, clean, cook, and help with any task needed. The lady listened silently, her expression unreadable. Then, after what felt like hours, she spoke. "We will help you," she said. "But you must understand that this will not be easy. You will have to follow our rules. You will have to work hard every day. Do you understand?" Amina nodded without hesitation. She would do anything for her children, endure anything for them. She did not even pause to think of her pride. "Yes, I understand," she whispered. Her first days at the estate were harder than anything Amina had ever imagined. She woke before dawn, cleaned the entire house from top to bottom, cooked breakfast for the family, and then ran errands, washed clothes, and polished the floors. Her body ached constantly, but she never complained. The work was demanding, but Amina found a strange sense of pride in her ability to endure. She reminded herself that each hour of labor brought her children closer to a day when they would be safe, fed, and warm. Even so, the work took its toll. And some nights, she returned to her small shack exhausted, muscles stiff and hands blistered. Yet when she saw the eyes of her children lighting up at the sight of a small meal she had managed to bring home, her exhaustion vanished. She smiled softly, letting herself enjoy the little victories. Sarah would hug her tightly, Omar would grin widely, and little Noor would reach out for her mother's hand, trusting and innocent. Those moments were more precious than anything else in the world. As days passed, Amina began to notice the rules of the household were strict. She could not rest until every task was done. Mistakes were met with disapproval, and she learned quickly to anticipate the needs of the family. She learned to move quietly through the corridors, to carry trays without spilling a drop, to clean in a way that left everything spotless. Despite the challenges, she never allowed fear to overwhelm her. Instead, she focused on the small joys, the laughter of her children when she returned home, the warm meals she could finally provide, the small savings she was beginning to set aside for their future. One afternoon, as she scrubbed the floors of the main hall, the lady of the house spoke to her softly. "You are very dedicated," she said. "It is not easy to work so hard and stay so committed. Your children are lucky to have you." Amina paused, unsure how to respond. She had never been praised for her efforts before. She nodded humbly and continued her work, feeling a warmth in her chest. Perhaps the hardships were not meaningless after all. Perhaps there was hope, but hope came with its own worries. Amina often thought about the line between survival and sacrifice. She worried that she had given too much, that one day her dignity might be compromised. At night, when the household was quiet, she would sit alone and think of her children. She wondered if one day they would understand the choices she made. She wondered if they would see that her sacrifices were not a weakness but an expression of her love. Amina also began to plan. She wanted to ensure that the work she did for the wealthy family was not the end, but a beginning. She thought of small ways to learn new skills from the household. She watched the cooks carefully, learning new recipes. She observed the lady of the house as she organized the home, noting methods that could help her manage her own small home someday. Each observation was an investment in the future, a chance to turn her temporary labor into lasting knowledge for her children. There were difficult moments as well. Some villagers whispered behind her back, questioning why she spent so much time serving the wealthy. Some of the children at the village school mocked Sarah and Omar for their mother's labor. Amina felt the sting of embarrassment, but she reminded herself that her actions were for survival, for growth, for hope. She could not allow the opinions of others to sway her resolve. The love for her children was stronger than any shame, stronger than any discomfort, stronger than any fear. As the weeks passed, Amina's children began to notice small improvements. Their clothes, though still worn, were cleaner and more intact. There was more food in the house, and they were able to attend school more regularly. Sarah could focus better on reading. Omar laughed more freely, and little Noor slept peacefully, without the growl of hunger in her stomach. Each change, no matter how small, was a victory. Each smile from her children reminded Amina that every moment of exhaustion and every ache in her body was worth it. One evening, after completing the household chores, Amina sat outside her shack with her children and looked at the stars. The sky seemed brighter that night, as if it recognized her determination. She thought of the path ahead. More work, more challenges, but she no longer felt hopeless. She had faced fear, hardship, and uncertainty, and had survived. She had learned that perseverance and love could endure even in the most difficult circumstances. In her heart, Amina made a quiet promise. She would continue to work, to endure, to sacrifice, but always with a plan, always with hope. She would provide her children not only with food and shelter, but with the possibility of a better life, one where they could dream without fear. And no matter how difficult the days became, she would never let despair take root. She would fight, and she would rise, for the love of her children was stronger than anything else in the world. Amina's life had settled into a rhythm of constant labor, but the work was far from easy. Each morning she woke with the first light, her body aching from the previous day's tasks. She could feel every muscle protest as she rose, yet she never allowed herself to linger in weakness. She reminded herself silently that her children were waiting, hungry and hopeful, and that alone gave her the strength to face another day. The wealthy household demanded perfection. Every room had to be spotless, every meal prepared to exact standards, and every errand completed with speed and efficiency. Mistakes were met with criticism, and yet Amina worked tirelessly, pushing herself further than she ever imagined possible. She had learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken aloud, moving quietly through the corridors, carrying trays of food without spilling, arranging flowers with precision, and polishing floors until they shone. Despite the harshness of her routine, Amina found moments of quiet observation and learning. She studied the cooks in the kitchen, noting the techniques for making bread rise and sauces taste richer. She observed the lady of the house as she organized accounts and managed staff. Every observation was a lesson, a potential tool she could use to improve her own life. Amina reminded herself that knowledge was a treasure even greater than gold. Her evenings, however, were often filled with exhaustion and quiet reflection. After returning to her humble shack, she would sit with her children and watch them eat the small meals she had been able to provide. Each bite was a victory, and she savored their smiles more than anything else. Sarah would hug her tightly and whisper, "Mama, I hope we never have to worry again." Omar would giggle, running around the small yard, while Noor sat contentedly in her mother's lap. In those moments, Amina felt that the hardships were worth enduring, that love and sacrifice could sustain even the most difficult lives. Yet the trials did not end. Some days Amina faced small humiliations in the household. Perhaps she spilled a drop of water, misplaced a utensil, or forgot a minor detail. The sharp voice of a servant, or the disapproving glance of the lady of the house, reminded her that perfection was expected. Each correction stung. But Amina did not complain. She had learned that endurance was more powerful than anger, and that resilience was her shield against the world. She used these moments as lessons, improving her work bit by bit, until even the smallest tasks became flawless under her careful hands. Despite the challenges, Amina's perseverance began to attract attention. The lady of the house, once distant and formal, began to notice her dedication. One afternoon, as Amina carefully organized the pantry, the lady spoke to her gently. "You are very diligent," she said. "I have seen how hard you work, and I admire your dedication. Your children are lucky to have you as a mother." Amina's cheeks flushed with a mixture of pride and humility. She did not seek praise. She worked for survival, for her children. Yet hearing those words filled her with a quiet warmth, a sense that perhaps her efforts were seen, perhaps her struggles were not in vain. She bowed slightly and whispered, "Thank you, ma'am. I do what I must for my children." As the weeks passed, Amina's endurance was tested further. One particularly hot afternoon, she was sent to the market to buy ingredients for a feast the household planned for visiting relatives. The sun blazed mercilessly, and she walked for miles under the heat, carrying baskets heavy with fruits, vegetables, and grains. Her arms ached, her feet were blistered, and sweat drenched her clothes, yet she refused to rest. She thought of her children at home, hungry and waiting, and each step became lighter in her mind. Her determination carried her through exhaustion. When she returned, the lady of the house examined the baskets carefully and nodded. "Well done," she said simply. Amina felt a rush of quiet triumph. She had survived the journey, completed her task, and proven herself capable. These small victories became a rhythm in her life, tiny sparks of hope in the long stretches of labor and struggle. At night, Amina would reflect on the sacrifices she had made. She sometimes questioned whether her choices were right, whether enduring hardship for the sake of survival was worth it. But each time she saw her children sleeping peacefully, their bellies full for the first time in days, she knew she had chosen correctly. Her heart swelled with love, and she resolved silently to continue, no matter how difficult the path ahead became. The work began to bring unexpected benefits. The lady of the house, impressed by Amina's dedication and intelligence, began giving her tasks that were more meaningful than menial chores. Amina learned to organize the household accounts, plan meals, and assist in teaching the younger children of the family. Each new responsibility was a challenge, but also an opportunity. She grew more confident, more capable, and discovered that her perseverance could open doors she had never imagined. Even so, Amina never forgot her children. Every action she took, every task she completed, had their welfare at its heart. She saved small amounts of money whenever she could, careful not to let anyone notice. She bought clothes, shoes, and books for her children, and occasionally treated them to small pleasures like sweet treats or a visit to the nearby river. These small joys became their sanctuary, a reminder that life, even in hardship, could hold moments of happiness. The villagers began to notice the change as well. Some commented quietly on how Amina's children seemed healthier and happier. Farah's eyes sparkled with newfound confidence. Omar laughed more freely, and little Noor grew stronger each day. The villagers whispered among themselves, recognizing the resilience of the mother who had endured so much. Amina, however, remained humble, never seeking praise. She simply continued to work, to endure, to sacrifice, because she knew that love required action, not recognition. Yet life at the estate was not without danger. Amina constantly had to navigate the fine line between obedience and dignity. She faced moments where her pride was tested, where she could have given in to despair or anger, but she never did. Instead, she used these moments to strengthen her resolve, reminding herself that endurance, patience, and careful judgment were the keys to survival. Each challenge became a lesson, each trial a building block for the better life she dreamed of for her children. Her children, too, began to notice their mother's sacrifices. Sarah, who had always been serious, started to take on small responsibilities at home, helping prepare meals and care for Noor. Omar became more considerate, understanding the effort his mother put into each day. Little Noor, though too young to comprehend fully, sensed the love that flowed through Amina's every action. The family bond grew stronger, a shield against the hardships that surrounded them. As months passed, Amina's resilience began to transform her life. She no longer felt as trapped by fear or despair. Instead, she moved with purpose, each action deliberate and filled with meaning. She had learned that survival was not merely enduring hardship, but using every experience to grow stronger, to prepare for a future that could one day be better than the present. One evening after completing the household chores, Amina sat outside her shack with her children, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, a moment of beauty in a world that often seemed harsh. She held her children close, whispering words of comfort and encouragement. "We will get through this," she said softly. "We are strong, and we will find a better life." In her heart, Amina knew that the road ahead was still long and full of challenges. But she also knew that she had discovered an inner strength she had never imagined. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the determination to move forward despite it. She had learned that love was not only a feeling, but action, sacrifice, and perseverance. And most importantly, she had learned that hope, even in the darkest times, could light the way forward. Months had passed since Amina began working at the wealthy household. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more skilled in her tasks. But her life was still far from easy. Each day brought new challenges, and her body often ached from the endless labor. Yet a quiet sense of determination had taken root in her heart, a feeling that her sacrifices were not wasted. She was beginning to see small signs of hope, though she did not yet realize how much her life was about to change. One morning, as she prepared breakfast for the family, the lady of the house approached her. "Amina," she said gently, "you have been here for many months now, and I have seen how hard you work. I would like to give you more responsibility, tasks that are meaningful and important. Will you accept?" Amina felt her heart skip a beat. She had never been given such recognition before. She bowed her head respectfully and whispered, "Yes, ma'am, I will do my best."
The lady nodded and handed her a small notebook. "I want you to help me organize the household accounts and manage supplies."
"You will also assist in teaching the younger children here. I know you are capable." The weight of the tasks was heavy, but Amina welcomed the opportunity. She worked carefully, learning to balance the household's needs with precision and patience. She discovered that the lady of the house was kind and fair, unlike others who had only demanded obedience without guidance. Amina began to see that help and compassion could exist even in places where she had expected only hardship. At the same time, Amina continued to care for her own children. She had saved a small amount of money and used it wisely to buy clothes, shoes, and books for Sarah, Omar, and little Noor. She began encouraging them to dream beyond their immediate struggles, telling them stories of places they could visit one day, of schools they could attend, and of a future where they would not have to worry about hunger or cold. The children listened, their eyes wide with wonder, and for the first time they believed that life could be better. Amina also began to notice subtle changes in the household. The family's attitudes toward her became warmer, more respectful. The lady of the house would occasionally smile at her, ask her opinion on minor decisions, or praise her for completing a task well. The children of the household, who had at first been distant, started including her in small activities, asking her questions, and even seeking her advice. Amina felt a small joy she had never experienced before, the knowledge that her work and dedication were respected. One afternoon, a minor crisis occurred. A sudden storm hit the village, and heavy rain flooded parts of the streets. The market was closed, and many families struggled to find food and shelter. Amina's small home was at risk, but she could not leave the wealthy household. The lady of the house noticed her concern and asked about her children. Amina explained the situation quietly, worrying about their safety. The lady's eyes softened, and she immediately offered assistance. She provided food, blankets, and even arranged for a small temporary shelter near the estate so that Amina's children would be safe and dry during the storm. Amina was overwhelmed with gratitude. She had never expected such compassion, and the relief she felt was immense. She realized that her perseverance and patience had not gone unnoticed, and that sometimes kindness could appear when least expected. The storm, which could have been a disaster, became a symbol of hope. Help could come even in the darkest moments, if one continued to endure and trust in the goodness of others. The weeks following the storm were transformative. Amina was now entrusted with even more important responsibilities. She helped plan meals, manage supplies, and even taught the younger children of the household basic reading and writing skills. Her confidence grew daily, and with it a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. She realized that her abilities could create change, not only for her children, but also for the people around her. Her own children began to flourish as well. Sarah became more diligent in her studies, inspired by her mother's determination. Omar's laughter grew more frequent and freer, and Noor thrived under her mother's loving care. Amina made sure to spend every evening with them, sharing stories, playing small games, and reinforcing the values of courage, hard work, and hope. Each night as she watched them sleep, she felt a sense of peace she had never known. For the first time in years, the weight of despair seemed lighter, replaced by cautious optimism. The villagers also began noticing the change. Amina, once known only for her struggle, was now seen as a woman of strength, resilience, and wisdom. People would stop her to ask advice or help with small tasks, recognizing her skills and dedication. She no longer felt invisible. Instead, she became a quiet source of inspiration, a living example of how perseverance and love could overcome even the harshest difficulties. One particularly meaningful day, the lady of the house invited Amina to sit with her and discuss ways to improve life for her family.
I can see how hard you work and how much you care for your children, she said.
I want to help you build a more secure future for them. We can work together to ensure they have education, food, and safety. Are you willing to accept guidance and support? Amina's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of joy and relief. She nodded eagerly. Yes, ma'am. I am so grateful. I only want my children to have a better life. From that day, the household began assisting Amina more directly. They provided her children with school supplies and arranged for regular meals so that hunger was no longer a daily worry. They taught her better ways to manage her household tasks, even providing small tools and materials to make her work easier. Amina felt her life transforming in ways she had never dared imagine. Her courage and patience were finally rewarded with tangible support, and she began to see a future that seemed brighter than the present. The most touching moment came when the lady of the house invited Amina's children to the estate. For the first time, Sarah, Omar, and Noor experienced a world different from their small shack. They played in spacious gardens, learned new skills, and were treated with kindness and respect. Amina watched them with tears in her eyes, seeing their joy and confidence blossom. She understood deeply that her sacrifices had not been in vain. Every long hour, every aching muscle, every moment of uncertainty had led to this reward. Amina also began to dream again, not just for her children, but for herself. She considered learning new skills, saving for a small home, and even starting a small business one day. The hope that had been buried under despair for so long was now growing, nurtured by the kindness and support of others. She realized that life, though harsh, could also bring unexpected opportunities for growth and happiness. Despite the progress, Amina never forgot her past struggles. She continued to work hard, remained humble, and remembered the nights of hunger and worry that had shaped her determination. Those memories gave her strength, reminding her to stay grounded, to continue persevering, and to teach her children the values of hard work, resilience, and hope. She wanted them to understand that even in hardship, courage and patience could lead to change. As months passed, Amina's life at the estate became more stable. Her children thrived, her work was respected, and she had gained skills and confidence that would serve her for the rest of her life. She had transformed not only her own circumstances, but also her children's future. The small shack that once symbolized despair now held laughter, warmth, and hope. Amina understood a powerful lesson. Life could be harsh, but endurance, patience, and love could transform even the most desperate situations. The kindness of others, when combined with her determination, had created a turning point in her life. She had learned that true strength was not only in enduring suffering, but also in remaining compassionate, humble, and hopeful. And as she tucked her children into bed one night, watching them sleep peacefully, Amina felt a profound sense of gratitude. The road ahead was still long, but she no longer faced it in fear. She faced it with courage, with hope, and with the knowledge that even in the darkest times, compassion and perseverance could illuminate the path forward. Amina's life had changed in ways she had never imagined. The struggles that had once consumed every hour of her day, the hunger, exhaustion, and uncertainty, were gradually replaced with hope, stability, and a sense of purpose. The wealthy household had continued to support her and her children, not just through temporary aid, but by teaching her skills, offering guidance, and showing her the power of trust and compassion. For the first time, Amina felt that a brighter future was possible, not only for her children but for herself as well. Every morning, Amina woke early, but now her days were different. She no longer carried the same weight of fear and desperation. Instead, she rose with purpose, organizing her tasks carefully and efficiently. She continued helping the household, now confident in her skills and respected for her dedication. Each chore she completed, each lesson she taught the younger children, and each task she managed brought her a quiet pride. She had not only survived hardship, she had grown through it. At the same time, her own children flourished. Sarah, now more confident and independent, helped care for her younger siblings and studied diligently at school. She began dreaming of becoming a teacher one day, inspired by the kindness and guidance that had changed her family's life. Omar, full of energy and curiosity, had developed a love for learning, often asking his mother questions about everything from nature to numbers. Little Noor, once frail and quiet, had grown stronger and more playful, her laughter filling their home with joy. Amina watched them with a mix of pride and relief, knowing that their lives were no longer limited by poverty and struggle. Amina also began planning for the future in ways she had never dared to before. She thought about starting a small business, perhaps sewing and selling clothes or teaching other children in the village. She considered building a small house for her family, one that would be safe and warm, with enough space for her children to play and grow. Each plan was small but meaningful, a step toward independence and dignity. The lessons she had learned while working at the household gave her the confidence to believe that she could achieve these goals. The villagers began to notice the transformation as well. Amina, once known only for her suffering, was now admired for her strength, resilience, and intelligence. People came to her for advice, for help with small tasks, or simply to hear her story. They saw that a life of hardship did not have to define a person, and that courage, patience, and determination could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. Amina remained humble, always attributing her success to perseverance and the support she had received, but her presence became a source of inspiration for many. One day, the lady of the house invited Amina to sit with her in the garden. The sun was warm, and the flowers smelled sweet. "Amina," she said softly, "I have seen how far you have come. You have worked tirelessly for your children, for yourself, and for the household. You are strong, capable, and deserving of every good thing that comes your way. I want to help you take the next step toward independence. Are you ready?" Amina's eyes filled with tears. She bowed her head, trying to hold back her emotions.
"Yes, ma'am," she whispered. "I want to provide a better life for my children and make them proud."
"I am ready to learn and work even harder if needed." The lady smiled and explained that she would provide guidance, resources, and even a small space where Amina could eventually run her own business or manage her household independently. It was an offer that Amina could scarcely believe, but it felt like the reward for years of struggle, sacrifice, and love. From that day forward, Amina began preparing for a new chapter in her life. She learned to manage finances, plan purchases, and run small projects with confidence. She taught herself to balance responsibilities efficiently, knowing that each skill she gained would help secure her family's future. Her days were still full of hard work, but now her labor was meaningful not just for survival, but for growth, independence, and hope. Her children became central to these efforts. Sarah helped with small business plans, learning how to budget and organize. Omar assisted by keeping notes and helping with small errands. Even little Noor, though still young, contributed in small ways, learning the value of effort and responsibility. Together they formed a strong family unit, bound by love, mutual respect, and shared dreams. Amina watched them grow with pride, knowing that her sacrifices had built a foundation for their success. Neighbors and villagers marveled at the transformation. The family who had once lived on the edge of poverty now moved with confidence and purpose. Amina's perseverance had not only improved their immediate circumstances, but had inspired others to believe that change was possible. She quietly encouraged young mothers in the village, teaching them small skills, sharing knowledge about work, budgeting, and childcare. She became a beacon of hope, showing that courage and determination could transform lives. Despite the progress, Amina remained grounded. She never forgot the long nights of hunger, the cold mornings, or the fear that had once weighed so heavily on her shoulders. Those experiences reminded her to remain humble, to continue working diligently, and to value every opportunity that life provided. She also reminded her children of these lessons, teaching them to respect work, to value kindness, and to understand that true success comes not from wealth alone, but from resilience, courage, and love. Amina's relationships with the lady of the house and her family grew stronger over time. The respect and kindness she had earned turned into trust and partnership. The lady often consulted her on important matters, asked for her opinion, and included her in planning household projects. Amina felt valued not only for her labor but for her intelligence, judgment, and character. She realized that true respect is earned not by seeking it, but by acting with integrity, diligence, and compassion. One of the most memorable moments came during a village celebration. Amina was invited to participate, along with her children, in an event that celebrated local achievements and success stories. As she walked through the crowd, villagers whispered and pointed, recognizing her and her children. They saw not a mother who had struggled, but a mother who had transformed hardship into opportunity, despair into hope. Amina felt a quiet joy, knowing that her story could inspire others to persevere, just as she had. The family's life continued to improve steadily. Amina was able to rent a small but comfortable house close to the estate, giving her children space to play safely and study without interruption. She started a small sewing project, producing clothes that she sold in the village market. Her earnings were modest but steady, enough to cover basic needs and invest in her children's education. She no longer had to depend solely on the household's support, and the sense of independence strengthened her confidence and pride. Education became central to her children's lives. Sarah's school performance improved significantly, and she began dreaming of becoming a teacher or a professional in the future. Omar developed a love for learning that went beyond the classroom, asking questions about science, history, and the world around him. Little Noor's health and happiness were now stable, and she thrived under the care of her mother and siblings. Amina knew that the sacrifices she had made, the long hours of labor, and the moments of fear had all contributed to this transformation. As the years passed, Amina reflected on her journey. She had faced unimaginable hardship, moments of despair, and a sense of helplessness that could have broken her. Yet she had endured, driven by love for her children and faith in the possibility of a better future. Her perseverance had been rewarded, not through luck alone, but through determination, patience, and the kindness of those who had recognized her worth.
Amina's story became a testament to the power of courage, sacrifice, and hope.
She had turned her struggles into lessons, her challenges into opportunities, and her despair into action. She had learned that life could be harsh, but it could also be transformed through love, hard work, and compassion. Most importantly, she had secured a future for her children, one filled with opportunity, education, and joy. As she watched her children play in the garden of their new home, laughter ringing through the air, Amina felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The journey had been long and difficult, but every sacrifice had been worth it. She had faced despair and emerged stronger, and she had given her children not just a home and sustenance, but the knowledge that love, courage, and perseverance could overcome any obstacle. Amina knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but she faced it with confidence, hope, and unwavering determination. She had transformed her life through resilience and love, proving that even in the darkest moments, a mother's courage could light the way for her family. The story of her struggle, endurance, and eventual triumph would live on, not only in her children's hearts, but also in the hearts of everyone who witnessed her strength. And in that quiet moment, as the sun set over the village, Amina held her children close and whispered a promise to herself and to them. No matter what happened in the future, they would face it together, with love, hope, and courage. Her journey from desperation to dignity was complete, and her family's future was bright, filled with possibilities that only a mother's unwavering heart could achieve.